Hello, everybody, and happy Non-Monogamy Visibility Week. I believe we are now going live, and welcome to our roundtable discussion about visibility and non-monogamy. My name's Mel. We're going to be talking for about an hour, and you can leave your comments, whatever platform you're watching on. We have the wonderful Jessa Davis here supporting us on the tech side. She's part of OpenOrg. She's actually director of OpenOrg, and she'll tell us more about that later. And we welcome your comments, questions. We'll have a little moment where we can check in and maybe address some of your questions. But first of all, this is the week of visibility for non-monogamy. And I'm thrilled to be joined by some of my wonderful colleagues here in Vancouver to talk about what is it like to be non-monogamous and how we support non-monogamous people. So first of all, I want to invite us to do a round of introductions. So we're going to start off at the top of the screen. So Allie, if you would like to introduce yourself and then pass it along.
Of course. Hi, everyone. I'm Allie Brahmi. I'm a counselor here in Vancouver. I work virtually with individuals, polygroupings, and I've been doing that for 10 years. I kind of focus on the queer community, the kink community here in Vancouver. I also host queer events in Vancouver. And yeah, I'm really excited to be here for this conversation today. And talk about something that's really important to me, which is non-monogamy visibility. Over to you, Jen.
Thanks, Allie. My name is Jen Barton, she, her, and I have a coaching practice called Kaboom, yourkaboom.ca. I've been coaching since 2023, mostly in life coaching, but I switched over to relationship design coaching earlier this year, as I've been practicing non-monogamy myself for a better part of a decade and felt that was a calling that I had. So I run workshops through local libraries, and I also of course, coach other folks, individuals, and poly groupings as well.
Great. Yeah. So my full name is Loretta Lauren, but you can call me Lo. I'm a registered clinical counselor specializing in relationships, trauma, and personal growth. My approach is really rooted in somatics and social justice, and I work with individuals, couples, groups of all backgrounds, including those that identify as non-monogamous, queer, neurodivergent, and or racialized. And it's really exciting to be here with all of you today.
Oh, Megan, you're muted.
Thank you. Hi, let me start again. I am Megan Vaudry. I am a certified relationship coach, and my practice is called Non-Monogamy Coaching Vancouver. I work with folks in Vancouver and beyond, all about non-monogamy. That's my entire practice. That's what I do. And I work with people one-on-one, individuals, as well as couples and relationships. And I also offer workshops, mostly online, and then also sometimes out in the world at events and festivals primarily, and sometimes in Vancouver. Mel.
Hi, my name's Mel, they, them. I am a somatic experiencing practitioner. I'm a relationship coach. I am a published author. And I've been working with the queer and questioning and those who love them, who are exploring non-monogamy for over 10 years now, which feels phenomenal to say and makes me feel very old. I co-facilitate the Vancouver Poly 101 discussions with the wonderful Megan, and we'll have our guest facilitator coming in tomorrow, Roxana. And I love working with non-monogamous clients. I work from a focus on solo polyamory and relationship anarchy, but I find that translates for a lot of people. The focus on individual agency and autonomy without sacrificing community connections and attachment support and all that good stuff. Over to Roxana.
I'm going to copy some of your wording. So I'm Roxana. I use she, her. I work with Nested Heart, and Curate Counseling is my practice. I'm a registered social worker. I love working with non-monogamy and queer communities with a big crossover with kink, and I use curative kink as a trauma-informed lens for navigating self-awareness, body stuff, relational stuff, love, attachment stuff, and visibility is really important to me. So this week is really fun. I got invited to do lots of different things. I work virtually, and I have an office in Burnaby, and yeah, I really like collaborating with other people too in our community, because I think community building is a big lens for me for why non-monogamy, I think, can be so successful, is through that community lens.
Thank you, Roxana. So let's jump into our questions. And Jen, you are first with your question.
Love going first. Thanks, Mel. One of the things that comes up for me a lot in my practice is folks coming into the non-monogamy space for the very first time. And so my question to the panel is, what do you wish you had known in those very first years of polyamory or non-monogamy that you would give yourself that advice to now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's such a good question. And for me, maybe my answer is obvious to some people, but when I first started out, this was over 15 years ago, I was really prioritizing fluidity of relationships, and I put a lot of pressure on myself to maintain relationships through different iterations. And the thing that I wish I had been given was just that it's okay to take a break and a pause with a relationship with someone, and especially if you're moving through escalation, de-escalation, in and out of various structures, that it can actually be really helpful to take a bit of a break and pause on that relationship. And it doesn't mean that you can't come back and renew that relationship again down the road, but just that I wish I had offered myself more breathing room and less pressure to make it all work through all of these different iterations.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's so many things I could say to this one, but what comes to mind is, when I was first starting out, what I really didn't realize is that everyone is going to respond to non-monogamy really differently. It depends on where you are in the relationship configuration. It just depends on your person and your attachments and what you're bringing to relationships. And it's really impossible to overestimate how different humans can be from each other in relationships. And so if I could start it all over again, I would just keep in mind that I don't know what I don't know. And with any new person, it's a new discovery. So, going slow, asking lots of questions, and, folks we don't always really know how we're going to feel when we try something. We don't know how we're going to answer a question, and, how to answer questions that we've never had before, right? So just knowing that it's a process of discovery with every new person, and that even though it can be challenging, that's part of the joy. That's part of the joy of it. So, yeah, that's what I would say about that.
For me, I think it's that you don't need to have a primary partner to make it work. I also was starting around 15 years ago. That's when Lo and I met. And at that point in time, there was almost nothing in the literature or in role modeling around solo polyamory or a relationship anarchy. And I remember experiencing so much pressure and assumption from others that this was maybe just a phase until I found a new primary partner, or that I was maybe somehow dangerous to people who were in polyamorous relationships with a primary partner, that I was somehow going to try and take that primary partner away from them because I didn't have a primary. And so I think having more role modeling for that would have really helped me, which is probably why I do so much about speaking about solo polyamory and trying to show that role modeling for other people now.
Trying to find the button. So I've been non-monogamous for about 10 years. And I think I do come from the lens of having like an anchor partner. And one of the things that we both reflect on at the beginning was really wishing we had made more time, like intentional time, to grieve the end of that relationship. So I talk about that a lot with my clients, that and deconstructing words, labels, and definitions. The first 3 years for me personally were a little bit messy because we were like, yeah, like, how do we want to define this? How do we experience this? And it was something even as simple as love. So when I regularly suggest strongly to my clients, like, really think about how you define love, because that shift and like detoxifying from some of the mindset, so that kind of going in, you don't necessarily know exactly what you want, but I think that making space and time to like figure it out, that pacing piece, and not being able to, go from point A to Z, knowing that there's a lot of little stops and starts along the way, and that those stops and starts aren't necessarily like, they're not positive or negative necessarily. They're just a part of the process. And I love now, like, even the reiterations, like Lo was saying, of the relationships, regularly making time to like, celebrate what's new, what's different, what have we let go in our relationships, and what have we welcomed in, has really, I wish that was like more presented like on a platter for me when I first started. Like, it's okay to be sad and excited about the process.
Yeah, lots of great wisdom here. I think for me, especially right at the very beginning, when I started, over a decade ago, coming in very anxious into it, I really wish I had known like what I know now about the feeling of urgency, and to tend to it, to really tend to it with compassion, turn to it with care, instead of like making decisions from it or taking action from it. Yeah, that was really helpful to learn, and that like reiterating safe experiences over and over with a partner, going slow, is what, like, kind of go slow to go fast in a way, like it kind of having those safe experiences over and over again is what's going to help you feel like, okay, we can make more, we can do more with each other, we can go further or explore more or take bigger steps or whatever. I feel safer, all those kinds of things in this new area. And tending to that urgency, learning how to be your own safe person, when other people are out on a date or when you're whatever. That for me was really important, and I that was a big piece for me. Yeah, I wish people knew that.
Yeah, thank you everybody for answering those really beautifully. I think for me, if I was to answer with his own question, it's a conglomerate of everybody's answer, but go as slow as the slowest person is the best piece of advice that I was given. Ali, to your point, that sense of urgency. I was in my very early 30s when I opened things up with my partner of over 15 years, I think, 13 years at the time. And I was like, everything was so exciting, everything was so new, and I just wanted to do it all at once. And I had to be reminded to sort of slow my roll a little bit. And I'm so glad that I did, because that helps with the longevity and the success of that relationship, and how we actually approached polyamory. And at Mel's point, there wasn't any literature on, like, we had a couple of books and maybe a podcast, and maybe you had a friend that was doing it, but just sort of had to create our own work in that, and our own tools and doing that. So doing the work is really important too. Oftentimes I will tell clients, that come in as couples, and they come in and they say, oh, we're solid, we're so solid. And I say, okay, that's great. You want to open up your relationship? Well, a couple of things you need to know is that you're no longer solid, you're liquid. And the opening up of your relationship is actually the death of your monogamous relationship. So just have the idea that you need to start from scratch and build a new foundation on that liquid, which is really hard to do. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I love that, Jen. And I I think this is a nice tie-in to my question for everybody, because I suspect we're going to be talking about some of the same things. But my question for folks is, what do you want more people to understand is totally normal to struggle with in their non-monogamy? And I'm curious, like, what have you encountered that you see clients struggling with a lot, and you're like, I just want you to know this is okay, this is normal. Yeah, Roxana.
Yeah, so I love this one because it's so validating, I think, just to be able to talk about this. I regularly am saying it's normal and okay to feel insecure, to feel jealous, to feel anxious. Those are the top three for me that I get on a regular basis. And a lot of it is like they feel bad that they have that feeling. And that's the first step of just being like, yeah, that's actually, of course you're feeling anxious. Of course you're feeling insecure. Of course you're feeling jealous. And it's not having the feeling that's the problem. And I think starting there is just really reassuring for me, but also like I love seeing my clients soften toward themselves. And like what Ali was saying, like being your own safe person, that's the work. And I wish more people would, like, when we slow down, the slowing down isn't just like to try to feel better about the things that are happening, but the work in slowing down is creating that safety. And that is like safe having those hard feelings, being anxious and saying yes, whatever the and is, like anxious and excited, or nervous and unsure. And that's, I feel like this is a major topic in my practice for sure. And I really love creating safety and duality. Like you can be like, I really am excited about exploring this, and it might murder me, like I might not be like, oh, I don't know how to survive this, but I really want to do it. And that's, I don't know, it's fun for me as a social worker, but also in the community playing with those concepts.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like when you're trying to become your own safe person, that's so much work. A lot of that is tied into like not knowing how to soothe on your own. Mm-hmm. And the other thing I noticed with that is that I think, a lot of people struggle with early on is this like kind of, I don't actually know what I want, because I'm maybe not in connection with that part of me that is distressed, that I don't know how to soothe. I don't actually know what I want. I don't know how to say no. I don't know how to identify like how this is going to feel for me. Until after it's happened, maybe. And so kind of figuring out like, that whole sequence of events, and being able to communicate it in a way that's supportive of them and of the relationship or relationships that they need to communicate it in, rather than like kind of destructively or explosively, I think is a totally normal thing to struggle with. And to kind of need to take some steps to learn that kind of like, self-identifying, like, what do I want here? What am I doing? What's in this for me?
Yeah, I agree. Roxana, I think I agree with you probably on the jealousy point. I was going to flip it around and say compersions can sometimes be a struggle. For those who don't know, compersion is you loving the success of your partner's successes. You can talk about this in any category, not just in relationships, but if my partner's going out and having a date, I want to have them come back like with joy on their face, right? Because that gives me joy. That's compersion. And sometimes the struggle of having the compersion because your needs are not being met, or, it can kind of translate into jealousy or insecurity in that. So I think that that's probably the biggest one for me. But also struggling in having difficult conversations where I've never had to have difficult conversations before. So when we're talking about sexual health and STIs was a really big hurdle in the very beginning, because all of a sudden now I go from having a monogamous relationship where this wasn't a topic of conversation. We had to go for a physical once a year, but that was it. We didn't have to go getting tested every 3 to 6 months, or, when a slip up happens, or, so having those conversations on a regular basis with partners, with anybody that you're seeking partnership with was in the beginning. So practicing that over and over and over again, and having a script ready to go and all of that. I think that was something that I struggled with in the first year, getting comfortable with that. And now I can say that I'm pretty darn comfortable with it 10 years in. But I think that's something that I think a lot of people could struggle with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these are all such good answers. And, you know, like, I think what I would add to all of this is there is no perfect poly person. I feel like a lot of my clients come in struggling with this like idea that they're not living up to some standard of what it means to be the perfect poly person. Just like there isn't any perfect monogamous person, like, and every relationship is so different, and there's going to be so many different iterations of what that means for each relationship and each person. And like, it's okay to struggle with that. I think there's like an extra like sense of like urgency to try to prove that poly is like an okay thing to do. And so we can really hold ourselves to these really high standards. And then that adds this extra like struggle that like doesn't need to be there and is totally normal. And it makes a lot of sense that it's there given that context that we're in this like heteronormative world.
Yeah. Oh, I want to echo everything that's been said so far. And the way that I would do that is it's normal to struggle with whatever you're struggling with. You know, we are all humans. We all struggle in different ways. And so whatever you're struggling with, that's your struggle. That's your path. This is part of your journey towards what you truly want. If you truly want non-monogamy, you're going to have to walk through the fire. And what I see a lot is in my practice is folks not quite being ready to or not knowing how to give up the usual markers of a secure relationship. So, you know, promising your relationship is going to look the same way forever, you know, being exclusive sexual partners, being exclusively emotionally intimate, all of these things that we can really take for granted in monogamy. It's really normal to struggle when we're walking through deconstructing the parts of non-monogamy that we have chosen to deconstruct in our relationships as we move towards the relationship model we're choosing. Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. And yeah, I love what you were just touching on there, Megan, because I mean, anyone who knows my work knows I love talking about the monogamy hangover. But I think that really is the thing that I see most people struggling. And that's why I started to talk about this monogamy hangover is like, we've all been raised and almost indoctrinated in a sense in that compulsory monogamy to the point where we don't realize it. It's so pervasive. It's the soup we're swimming in. And just letting clients know that it's okay and it's going to take time to unwind all of that and, you know, unwind the perfectionism and grieve the, you know, what they thought was this sole model for secure relationships and that is not easy. You know, we all want to be that kid in the candy store and be like, I can date all the people now, hooray. And the reality is going to require a lot of work. And that is normal. It is normal because you're learning new things. You're retraining your brain and your nervous system to respond in new ways. So yeah, that would be how I would answer my own question. I think I'm passing it to Lo now.
Yeah. And I also want to mention, I know there are some folks kind of watching us live here that we will probably have a chance for a Q&A. So if at any point you can just throw your comments into wherever you're watching and we'll see those, any questions you might have. So my question is about someone seeking support. So someone who's non-monogamous or exploring non-monogamy. There's so many options out there for support, coaches, counselors, therapists, social workers. How does someone think about how to choose amongst, you know, all of those options, and how does someone pick a person to support? What kind of tips do you have for that?
Yeah, this is a really great question. So I wrote an article about this on my Substack not so long ago. And so with seeking support, with seeking professional support from a therapist or a coach or a social worker or a similar practitioner, the relationship is the most important thing. This needs to be someone that you can talk to. This needs to be someone that you can feel really comfortable relating to and that you feel really gets you. So That's really the primary thing. And then understanding that support can come in a lot of different forms, but it's really important to choose someone who is very familiar with non-monogamy. That is whether you're getting support from a friend, from a pal, or from a professional. Really learning to ask, knowing the right questions to ask, like to ask a professional if they're experienced in working with a particular kind of non-monogamy that you want to work with, that you are wanting to practice. And ideally, in the case of choosing a professional, choosing someone who really specializes in monogamy, because there's a lot of practitioners out there who are friendly with non-monogamy, have some understanding of it, especially because it's so widespread. But I really recommend, if you're looking for support with issues around non-monogamy, to seek a professional who actually specializes in that. So, yeah.
I'm thinking back to the days when helping professionals like us were like the rare unicorns, because we have both the lived experiences of non-monogamy and we have training as helping professionals. And I think it's wonderful that there's so many more people. I mean, even within the Vancouver and BC region, there are so many more helping professionals than just the 6 of us. It's like, you're just the people I happen to know really well. I think that finding that balance is really important. Just to touch back on what Megan was saying, like, I think that there are people who are really amazing therapists and amazing counselors and social workers and life coaches, etc. And they might be supportive of non-monogamy, but they may not have the tools to actually understand how are we unwinding these dynamics. And even people who are non-monogamous may have their own biases of like, well, this is what, this is my kind of non-monogamy, and these are the tools I have for that. But they may not be able to speak to other forms of non-monogamy. And, for me as a coach, I'm very explicit in all of my website and all my materials. Like, I'm a solo polyamorous relationship anarchist. This is the bias that I bring in. And I hope that people who are reaching out for support ask their helping professionals, what are your biases? What is the lens that you bring to this work? Because you want to find the compatible values. And I think that's same with any kind of helping profession. If you're working with someone and you don't have compatible values with them, you're just going to feel like there's friction all the time. And that's not necessarily going to be the most helpful support for you.
Yes, and all of that. Honestly, I think one of my favorite things about being a social worker is when I do inquiries, that's the first thing I talk about is my biases, because I'm not an expert. And so when I am reaching out, or people are asking like, who do I reach out to, or how do I find my person, I have them ask that question. I'm like, what is your lived experience, or what are your biases? Because they show up in the room whether or not you want them to. And also look at why are you coming? Like, are you curious, or are you struggling with something specific? I think the why really can inform the where and the what and the who. I just keep coming back to community, and something that, like Megan said, it's not just, the therapist or the relationship coach or the social worker. It's also like, who are the community members that you're talking to? And so I always encourage my clients to build their community and to find non-monogamous community with shared values. So yeah, if you're partnered with children, it's going to be very, very different than if you're solo polyamorous, and that just informs who you talk to and how you gain that support. So I think a little bit of self-awareness helps this, like figuring out okay, why am I seeking support? Where are my sticky points? And then not being afraid to show up in the room and ask people, if someone has a big bias, especially for me, working with a lot of kinky and queer community, it's very niche, it's very othered, and acceptance and validation is huge. So not having that in the room wouldn't be appropriate for a lot of my clients. And so they seek me out in addition to seeking other people. So again, the other piece I usually ask, especially therapists, I'm comfortable personally working with other therapists, and some people aren't. And so I just like transparency. And that is a big piece for me. When I show up with my clients, I'll be like, oh, is it okay? I'm seeing this other person. Absolutely. I just want to know about it. How can we as a community of helping people support our people who are seeking out that help?
Absolutely. I think that's really important. Having community, clients having community support, peer support, attending Poly 101 or other discussion groups. I always recommend that for folks because it's so important to have, friends or peers that you can connect with about this. It's just a different kind of way to bounce ideas around. But also for us as professionals, having support, community support is so important. I also think it's really helpful and important for folks when they are seeking support to identify what level of support they're looking for. What I mean by that is, are they looking for someone, like, are they coming to a professional who to talk about non-monogamy and looking for support specifically with non-monogamy, and they're really struggling with it? Then for sure they need someone who, like we're all talking about, is an expert in non-monogamy, right? Or are they just non-monogamous, but they need to talk about something else? Then they might be okay with, they might be talking about depression, or they might be talking about, work or whatever. Then they might be okay with someone who has expertise in another area, in the area that they're coming to talk about, and is accepting of non-monogamy, or is going to, kind of all problems lead to non-monogamy. Like your problems with work are because of your non-monogamous relationship, right? So kind of identifying, like, what do I actually need my clinician to be an expert in or to be accepting of in terms of my non-monogamous relationship? I think it's an important thing to kind of ask yourself about. And just knowing that, like, I think in some ways the days of perhaps having a clinician that you work with forever and ever, in some ways are over. Like, people are not experts in everything, right? So you might have for 5 years work with, when you're working with childhood trauma, you might work with this professional. And then when you move on and you're working deeply in your relationship stuff with non-monogamy, you work with, one of us, right? You work with a different kind of clinician, right? And you kind of might develop different relationships or many relationships. You might be polyamorous with your professionals, who knows, right? But I think kind of thinking about it maybe a little bit differently is helpful.
Yeah, Allie, you stole my line. I was going to say I'm polyamorous with professionals. Using a good mix of therapists, coaches, social workers. I don't think it's an or, I think it's an and trying out new ones that see you for different stages of your journey. I think I am a proponent of using a therapist as well as a coach. One can sort of heal your wounds. The other one can sort of move you forward and create tools and do that. And, I don't live in the or. I definitely live in the yes and the both and the all of that. So I think that's a really big point. But I don't want to drag on because I feel like everybody else also said exactly what I was going to say, which is choose your therapist or your coach or whoever it is that you're working with based on your vibe with them, your relationship. Is really, really important, and the level of trust that you need with that person. And then the other one is in that community build as well. You seek out those groups. There's some really lovely groups here in Vancouver. There's one for everybody. There's ones that are queer focused. There's ones that are solo polyamory focused, and find that group and start going to those meetups. I did that way too late, I think, in my own personal journey, and started going to these groups fairly recently in the last couple of years. But building that community where we center those conversations around, normalizing the life, and I think that's been a really big help. And you're not just building community through partnerships and through kink and through, like, you've got all your bases covered that way. So.
Great. Yeah, I just saw this question come in from someone. Maybe we can just do a quick little touch on this. As someone who is a monogamous intern therapist working in a consensual non-monogamy therapy practice, how do I get clients to trust me if the recommendation is to find someone who specializes in consensual non-monogamy? I think it's really important to know what your own specialties are and to be really comfortable referring out to people. So if it's not an area that you feel really comfortable in or is in your scope of practice, it's, your ethical duty to refer out, and there's lots of great people to build those connections with. And as we've been talking about, it can be a really beautiful collaboration to be working across different practitioners. That said, if you are someone who is monogamous but also wants to be working with non-monogamous clients, I think being really honest about this, I mean, lots of people will take the 15-minute free consultation options if you have that. I'm just being really honest with people about where your personal practice is and also what your scope of education is. Because that honesty, I think, is the thing that builds the trust. Like if someone feels like you can talk about it, you understand it, you're supportive, and you're being honest about where your personal experience and biases live, that's a great way to be building good rapport with your clients.
For a second. I think also recognizing that this is a cross-cultural relationship. Monogamy is one culture, it's the dominant culture, and non-monogamy is a different culture. And so if you're wanting to work with, just like queer culture is a different culture, right? So if you're wanting to work cross-culturally, you are coming from the dominant culture, you have a lot of learning to do about this other culture in order to work with it adequately and respectfully. You absolutely can. We do that all the time, right? We don't have to only work with populations with which we have lived experience, but we have to do that with care and respect to those communities.
So back to our questions. So lately I've been really interested in how the increasing visibility of non-monogamy in popular culture, in
I'm
media.
just going to jump in.
Sorry. Yeah.
I think we've jumped order.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. We're running a little bit.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, Roxana. I got a little bit overexcited there. Roxana, thank you, Mel.
Totally okay. I was like, oh, that's fine. Less for me to do. I am a parent, so when I think of visibility, I automatically kind of go to children. Also because that's what kind of comes up in my practice a lot. So I'm genuinely excited for this question to be answered by you all, just because I like learning more about how other people experience this. So my question is, how have you navigated non-monogamy with the children in your life, whether it's your own or a partner's or another human in your life that you're investing time and energy into, or how would you like to? If you don't have children in your life, how do you imagine you would like to navigate non-monogamy with them?
Yeah. As a previous child and aunt, sibling, I find that my nibbling understands a lot more than I find this about most children. They understand a lot more than we give them credit for often. My nibbling didn't bat an eye when I brought a new partner to holiday events. They were just kind of like, where's other partner? And I was like, oh, they couldn't make it, but this is so-and-so, also my partner. And they were just like, okay. And went on, different partner, different gender, didn't care. Had a conversation that evening with their parents, unflappable. I think that has a lot to do with my my sister and the way that they have she has raised her kiddo. But we can learn a lot from our kids and the way that they are just kind of, okay, well, if you don't seem bothered by it, I won't seem bothered by it. If everyone's taking this as normal, then I will accept this too. That's kind of how I see most kids responding. They seem pretty ready to accept if we give them the space to.
Sally. For me, this was something that was fairly new in my life in the last few years. I tended to avoid partnerships with folks with children because I chose to be child-free myself. But I found somebody that's got children. So here I am in love with kids in my life for the first time ever. So interesting as a transition period for me, and learning to be a sort of a co-parent situation a little bit more. So I think the biggest piece for me is creating safety with the kids to ask questions. And we have a wide variety of ages in the children in my life now. And one of the things is, the conflict that could potentially happen in those relationships. So I have amazing relationships with my metamors and their children as well, and sort of showing kids that this is and can be normalized to a point where this is now looking more like a blended family than it does in a situation where it's like, oh, you don't know about this person, that person, and then the kids are going to sense that conflict of, oh, we have to keep these two things separate. These two people never can be in the room at the same time, which is definitely not true in the relationships that I have. So actually having stronger relationships with your metamors, and especially if they have kids as well, and showing them that this is all normal, has been the biggest part of inviting children into my life. And now it's interesting now that I've got children in my life that it feels like all of the partners that I've chosen since then, and also all the metamors all have children. And I'm like the crazy aunt that just sort of comes in and but yeah, creating the safety has been a really big thing, and they can come to me and ask me questions anytime, and happy to navigate those conversations as age appropriate as those conversations can be.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo what Ellie said there. Kids are amazing. Kids get stuff really easily often and ask really good questions. I'm actually really excited about this question because my anchor partner and I are talking about having children, and I'm just through the moon thinking about the opportunities for village and family, and getting away from the kids, and having extra support with the kids. And I just think that there's actually a lot of benefit for children to have, often different other partners are going to be, close people in your life. And so having that opportunity to have relationships with different adults is amazing. And that said, how I would navigate it is going to be relationship to relationship. There's going to be relationships that don't want any relationship with the kids, and there's going to be relationships that want really deep investment, and that relationship to the child is just like two adult relationships where we're navigating our boundaries and agreements, right? And it's just another relationship in the wide web of relationships to be navigating, and I think it's a really beautiful thing to be bringing children into.
Yeah, so I just first want to name, I have very limited exposure to children in my life. I'm child-free, and some of my friends have quite young children. But this is going to be something I'm going to be learning and navigating more as this chapter in my life continues. And fortunately, I have the privilege of being out as non-monogamous to most of the people in my life. And so I'm able to be transparent about having different partners. Yeah, and I'm grateful that I have that, because there are some instances in my life, some areas of my life where I don't feel comfortable being out. And so I want to be in the closet about being non-monogamous with certain extended network folks that are in my life. And yeah, but I just want to echo what's been said already, is that, yeah, children are so accepting and loving, and of queerness, of non-monogamy. And really, it's sometimes navigating the relationships with the parents in a good way, where you can bring forward the parts of yourself that are really important to bring forward. I think that being as out as you can is very important. And so being able to, just have wisdom and care in navigating relationships with parents in order to share just how wonderful polyamory can be, and it can bring in a more extended family feeling, like you said, Jen.
I want to bring in the amazing research that Dr. Elizabeth Sheff did on families and the children of polyamorous parents, because I think that was so affirming for a lot of people to realize that, yes, we have qualitative studies that tell us that it's not a detriment for kids to have polyamorous parents, and that in many cases they do get that experience of the village, and there's more adult caregivers that they can call upon, which is more supportive. You know, I think of it as like having an attachment network, not just as like a nuclear family attachment system. I'm one of those people who had a really strong desire to be a parent, and that was just not in the cards for me. So I'm not a bio parent, and at this point I probably won't be. But polyamory has allowed me to be part of the lives of some of the kids of my partners, and that's also informed me about how I want to go about being that cool eccentric auntie for the kids of my other friends and the people in my extended anarchical. But I do think that it's also really important for the parents to deeply consider like how they're intentionally introducing partners into the kids' lives, not just for the kids, but also for the partners. Because I have seen this happen a few times where, you know, someone's love of a partner extends to loving, you know, their other partners, but also loving their children. And then if the relationship doesn't work out, there's a disentangling process. And that can be hard for the children, and that can also be hard for the partners who are like, what do you mean I was part of this kid's life for 5 years and now I don't get to be part of this kid's life? And I think we could do with more resources around navigating that, also from that like blended family perspective of how, if we're choosing to involve more adults in our kids' lives, how are we also supporting that relationship to be sustained, even if the adults aren't getting along? Because like you said, it's an individual relationship, right? It's its own relationship. It's not just kind of in this lump with everything else. Yeah.
I love that. That was all juicy. It's really so good. So one of the reasons that actually pushed me to explore non-monogamy was my children. I had my third kid and I thought this is the stupidest design. Nuclear families are so dumb. Like they make no sense to me at all. And I was like, in what world should I personally be responsible and be everything to my 3 children? That makes absolutely no sense. It's like completely bonkers. So when I thought, like, what do I want for my children? I want them to be resourced. I want them to have community. I want them to know that if they can't go to mom, they can go to dad. They can go to this person. They can go to that person. Not just like a few key people, but to know that in order for me to be good, I also need other people. And so modeling for them and collaborating with them has been the joy. Like being visible to my kids gives me hope for like the next generations, you know, because how I view it is in our family, we share the house. So we collaborate on care and we collaborate on who comes in and who doesn't come in. It's not just a dictatorship. It is very much like what makes all of us feel safe. Like safety is really important to me. And so there was a time period where people weren't coming over. This house was for the children and that was fine. And I got a lot of crap for that from like other people who were like, oh, like, you know, whatever. But I think children are smart and they know when they're being talked down to and they know when they're being talked with. So when in doubt, I always encourage people to collaborate, to ask, to give space for them to ask you questions, because my kids didn't care, but they love telling other people about it now. And the way they talk about it makes me smile because it's all about like normalizing what my kids call like our weird. Like this is our level of weird and this is how we navigate that. And this is like normal for us. Kids are smart, and I think we should really encourage them to tell us what they think. So another thing that I do with children in my lives that aren't mine as well as mine, I ask them, what makes you feel safe? What makes you feel loved? What do you like that I'm doing? What do you hate that I'm doing? Like, how can I be better with you? And some of it is like, yeah, I want more candy, right? Like, no, obviously. Can I just, okay, here's more candy so you like me. But it's the idea that their voice matters and that their thoughts, their opinions, and their needs matter. And when you allow that to show up in the room, non-monogamy is not the point, you know, it's at all for children. It's really about how am I allowed to be here? So thank you for that.
Thanks, Joan. So lately I have been really interested in how the increasing visibility of non-monogamy in popular culture, in media, TV shows, social media, everything, has, whether or not that has helped the public understand what polyamory truly is. What I see a lot is this conflation of polyamory with dating around, with hookup culture, with casual relationships. And the question I want to ask is, how can we as a non-monogamous community push back against misinformation about what polyamory is and the conflation with casual relationships?
This is such a good question, because I don't think there's a single answer to it. The thing that comes up for me, first of all, is we need to change the ways that people are dating and meeting each other, because I think this isn't just a phenomenon with polyamory. I think there's a lot more unhealthy disposability culture that has come into the dating world because of the way that the apps work, right? You're swiping, you're not even taking the time to really absorb someone's profile, and so that, I think, plays into a culture of not considering people as whole people. It's just become this like needs meeting. And then I think that gets misinterpreted, or like people who are finding a groove with that might borrow or appropriate the language of polyamory. And then we get into this gnarly, messy situation. I mean, I think that there are a couple of apps that are doing a good job. Like I think Field and Plura both are going in the right direction in terms of being dating apps that support non-monogamous clients or non-monogamous people. But I think that there's room for us to have more of, I mean, I miss the old days of OkCupid, where you could just browse and you could read and you could take your time really getting to know somebody. And that goes back to that, what I think it was Ali said earlier about like noticing that sense of urgency, and like it's okay to slow down. And I think if, as we get, in our advocacy, like having more focus on that, it's okay to slow down. Just because you can date all the people doesn't mean that you have to date all the people. It's not Pokemon. You don't have to catch them all. and that, focusing on like it's the quality, not the quantity. That's I think, I feel my answer is a bit rambly, but that's what comes up for me.
I like that, Mel. I like it. I love this question, and I think it also has like a million answers. But one of the things that I was thinking of while Mel was talking was the idea of, yes, quality versus quantity, but also what do you want? So really talking about, and we are, this group is, but like in the communities more, what are your intentions with dating? Like, what do you want from this experience? And not treating people like meeting machines, from a vending machine. I do feel like that's like really prevalent still, which is yucky and annoying, because when you're not trying to engage in that way and then you're entering these spaces, like non-monogamous spaces, some people will come in, I don't know, I don't want to call them bad players. I'm maybe like really confused players, or I don't know, like not the right intention, but speaking to the intention of like, I think a lot of people aren't sure what they want from dating, but they're lonely, and that loneliness drives that urgency. And when we can slow down and create safety with ourselves, that urgency kind of doesn't necessarily disappear, but I think we hold it differently, and we interact with it differently. So I think we need more groups, like I love the Poly 101 groups. I love like having community spaces where we can talk about how do we want to date? Like, what do we want? Or like, how do we create connection, and not like decentering, monogamous romantic relationships as the end all be all, like really centering platonic, forever relationships. I love that as a drive. Like when I read The Other Significant Others, I really wish I actually would have read that forever ago, but it wasn't written forever ago, but it changed my whole whole perspective of how I experienced love and community. And I think that kind of takes away, like, my urgency wasn't really necessarily with like, oh, I have to have all these people. It was like, what kind of people do I have? Who can I lean on for what? And so, yeah, I think when we look at this again, I know I sound a little rambly, but like coming back to the hookup culture is like, what's the urgency? What's the need? What's the intention? And I think that's still quite messy for all of the greater populations overall.
Yeah, I think messy is definitely a good word for it. I think like I don't necessarily feel that always that bad with the conflation of non-monogamy and casual sex or hookup culture. I sometimes feel a bit of caution with the negativity that gets that comes up when people are like, well, we can't be that. We can't be casual sex or hookup culture, because that feels very sex negative to me. Like, casual sex or hookups are great. People should have them. Like, and plenty of polyamorous people might want them. There's nothing wrong with casual sex or hookups and people seeking those. And I think what we're all speaking about is not necessarily casual sex or hookups themselves, like on their own, but it's this kind of misunderstanding, as you said, Roxana, of like the terms that we are using. And so they're kind of being misused. People are mislabeling themselves. And so you start connecting with someone because they're calling themselves something, or they're using language. And then you find out that that's not really what they're doing, and it feels misleading in some way. And that feels disingenuous. It feels a little bit like you're being hoodwinked or something. And that feels really hurtful to feel like, I've gotten to know you, I've spent time talking to you, you've used these terms that like are meaningful to me in a certain way, and this community, this culture has an understanding of it, and that's not how we're using it, or you are using it, and language is very precarious that way because it's constantly shifting and moving. And I think that's what we're seeing, is this kind of like our language is getting kind of co-opted or moved because it's getting so much wider, it's getting so much bigger now. Like, so many people are entering the non-monogamous space, and when that happens, it's not like this niche language anymore. It's like exploding, and so it's like, whoa, what happened to our little culture and language? Like, oh my God. That's what I see anyway. For me, it's not so much like being associated with casual sex, being misunderstood in that way. It's like this kind of wafting of our language that feels so it feels like, what are the words even mean anymore? They mean nothing.
I know we're going to run out of time real soon, so I'm just going to talk about advocacy and visibility. And I think it doesn't just end with the non-monogamous community. I think it's a community in general who is curious about non-monogamy. And, advocacy can look like just, questioning when somebody says something that doesn't align with your view of it, and leading in with a little bit of curiosity, and what is it that scares you about this, or what is it that makes you think that that's how we do things. There's a lot of ways to practice polyamory. They say, like, there's just as many ways to practice it as there are people practicing it, right? We're all doing it very differently. We're all doing it like minusculely differently even. So I think understanding that the experience of non-monogamy and polyamory is going to look different for every single person. And we as individuals, and doing things like this can help with the visibility piece, and to show people that there are many different ways to do this, just as there is monogamy.
Great. So we're coming to the end of our time here, but we're thinking of maybe going a bit longer. Does that work for everybody? Yeah? Okay. Awesome. I won't spend too much time on this question then, because I think you all had really great answers. But the thing I want to say is that change happens at the speed of relationships. And so just like, like when we came across like things like homophobia, and people notice that when they had relationships with queer folks, their views changed, right? And I feel the same way about, like, again, like, what is non-monogamy? Like, how is it accepted? Is there stigma around it? And again, not saying that sex or hookup culture is bad, but just like, I think that this question inherently in there, there's like some stuff around the stigma of that. And so, like, you know, keep practicing your relationships, all of your relationships, and that's where change happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are all really amazing answers. I love hearing about the I love hearing about how the stigma against casual sex is really what we need to be pushing back against. I completely agree. And also, what I really, I think for me, what came up when I was listening to all of your answers is we need to bring care into all of our relationships. I know that sounds super obvious, but I think it just needs to be reiterated again in this age of dating apps that, you know, even if we are, you know, never gonna, you know, have an intimate interaction with someone that might be a really short-term relationship, how much care can you bring into that relationship? So yeah, amazing.
So I'm going to invite Jessa to just come back in, because there was a comment that came in, a really good question, and we can just take maybe 3 minutes to address this question, and then we'll come to our last question from Allie before we wrap up. So we'll go to 11:15 if that works for everybody. Yep. Okay, cool.
Cool. Did you want me to read out the question that we had in the chat?
Please.
Okay, yeah, cool. Yeah, that's a good question, actually. I think could be quite fraught in certain ways. But the question that we got from Noah was, is it okay to be polyam with professionals that you work with? And if I were to take a stab at this, perhaps, I would say HR policies are written under the assumption that relationships exist for the purpose of creating a family and an economic unit on a certain level. That being said, I think the most important thing for me thinking about like professional relationships is power dynamics, obviously. Mm-hmm. Outside of that, I think really the main thing is, do you want to mess up your work environment that way if things go wrong? So I think in general, it's good to have that compartmentalization. But I think, you know, as non-monogamy becomes more normalized, policies in the workplace and people's approach to these sorts of things might need to evolve from the sort of mononormative nuclear family kind of focused perspective on what a relationship would look like. That's sort of my take, and that's not a great answer. There's a lot there. It could be a whole seminar.
I think it could be a whole seminar. And I think you touched on the really big part of that, which is the power dynamics. Because I think that's important, whether, I mean, like, it could be someone that you're in the same company employed with, or you're talking about, I mean, all of us here are colleagues, but we all work for ourselves, or, you know, we're all doing different things. I think that, yeah, the power dynamics are really important. And for me, it's always about considering the larger ecosystem of relationships. And like you said, HR policies are there for a good reason. But how do we apply? I think that brings in questions of ethics too, of like, how do we apply that when there isn't an HR department? How do we apply that when we're looking at, you know, just wanting to be mindful of any power dynamics that might exist? I mean, it's something that I would steer away from if it was like I'm working within the same company. But I think that if you're, you know, colleagues, that's a different kind of professional dynamic. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to not actually give advice, but I'm just going to insert a thing that this is actually really common for mostly for men due to proximity. So they tend to build attachments and feel safe with people they have a lot of access to. And so if you're working in a job, you're going to be mostly around your coworkers. And so I do see this a lot. So I'm not answering, you know, should you, shouldn't you? But I do think we have to be able to talk about it beyond the power dynamics, understanding why this might be happening more, why people might be wanting to explore this, or absolutely like this is a thing that happens. So like pretending like, oh, just don't do it isn't necessarily answer. I don't know what the right answer is beyond the power dynamic conversation, but I just want to note that I do hear about it a lot, and I do experience it a lot from clients and even friends. And I think a lot of it is about that loneliness, and it's about where we spend our time. And if we're going from, being at home to being at work, those are the two main spaces we occupy. So, yeah.
Strongly agree.
Yeah, and in case this question was about, like, is it okay to be out as polyamorous with professionals at work? Depends on your workplace and how safe that is, and whether it jeopardizes your employment. Okay. Yeah, in case that was I don't think it was, but just in case that is the lens of the question.
That's a great point. I did an event for a company I used to work for on International Day for Polyamory, and that was the one thing that I sort of led with was, as a queer trans person in Seattle, I'm about to say something that could get me fired, and really depends on the industry where you work, and that's why at Open we fight for protections in the workplace so that people don't have to worry about self-censoring. I know people who've run into those issues. So yeah, whether it's being out or dating people, I think power dynamic's the most important thing. And then also, as with anything, is it safe to be authentic at work? And authenticity itself in the workplace is kind of a point of privilege. So that's important things to consider on this question. It's a great question. Yeah.
Yeah, I read the same ways you did, Ali. I assumed that it was about being out in the workplace as polyamorous or non-monogamous. And I have some experience with that coming from a big corporate company that we didn't even have visibility on psychological safety on being queer in the out in the workplace. And so changing that, and I was at the forefront of opening up a GSA in the workplace and making sure that we had proper support for those folks that can now feel safe for being out in the workplace. So looking at your policies, I work in HR as my 9 to 5, so I'm really at the forefront of all these discussions. And so, what are your DE&I policies? What safety do you have around, your outness in the workplace? Because it falls under that category, I think, in from the queer lens as well. So, I would say touch base with your HR person. That's probably your safest place to go first, and see, and we know, coming out as polyamorous over and over and over again to friends, to family, to whatever, you can do the same thing in the workplace. Know where you're safe, right?
Thanks for bringing that question in, Jessa. We'll come back to you in just a moment when we come to our wrap up. But Ali, I know you've been waiting with your amazing question here.
Yeah, this is a great question and we've touched on this a little bit throughout our chat today, but moving beyond visibility, I think, is an important question. We've talked about how non-monogamy now is kind of becoming a little bit of a larger conversation, but if we're moving beyond just being visible, what is the next step for non-monogamy now that it's a bit more popular? Yeah. What's next?
So I think there's a lot of different lenses that we can look at this one. We can talk about legislation and understanding next of kin and what your rights are for visitations and those kinds of things. That's a whole other conversation. I kind of want to take a fluffy approach to this and do talk a little bit more about the visibility. I know we're trying to move beyond it, but I think that there's not good enough representation yet in media. I think we look at non-monogamy in media as it being sort of sexy and nuanced and a little bit of conflict. Oh, somebody cheated on somebody, so therefore they're opening up their relationship. That's where the story begins. And it's not really about real stories. And we don't have a lot of real stories and things that we can look at to say, like, oh, my relationship looks like that, where we have lots of different versions of monogamy out there and have for many, many years. So when we're looking at TV, when we're looking at movies, what stories are we telling, and normalizing those stories, I think, is the biggest part, and moving visibility into more recognizable formats. Yeah.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, I think beyond visibility is normalcy. Like, and there's a piece there, like, yeah, the visibility isn't at a place where it's normal. And like where, normalcy for me is about like where it's not like a topic of question, like it's just like it's like, oh yeah, I'm non-monogamous, I'm this and this and this. It's just like another thing. It's not like, oh, here's something that we need to pause on and we need to talk about it. I mean, of course, talk about it if you want to, but the sense of it just being like a normal thing, that is an option, just like it's an option to be queer or straight or any other type of sexuality. And I think we have actually a really long way to get there.
Yeah, I just to expand a little bit on what you said and just reinforce and agree with you. We do have a long way to go before non-monogamy is normalized. We still live in a culture where the monogamy in the nuclear family is the assumption. And so I think now that we have more visibility with non-monogamy, what I would really love to see is the understanding that, like, beyond the binary of monogamy versus non-monogamy, what relationships look like when we are actively making choices to pursue or not pursue attractions based on where we want to invest our energy and in which relationships.
Yeah, I suspect that we're like at least 100 years away from a post-monogamous world. And I use that term deliberately because I think right now it's useful to frame ourselves as non-monogamous because that says we are in opposition to this thing that is the dominant default, expected, and is still for many people the only role model that they get. But in a post-monogamous world, like Lo and Megan are saying, like that's just not gonna be a thing. There's going to be open choice about like, well, what do you want to do when you grow up? How do you want to relate with people, right? There's freedom in that. But I think there's many steps to get there. And so when I think about, well, how do we reverse engineer that post-monogamous world? It is in doing more advocacy and having more healthy visibility. I think having more role modeling in the media is great. I'm seeing a lot more like little verticals and shorts and things like that people are doing to showcase non-monogamy and I think the full spectrum of healthy non-monogamous relationships is starting to creep in there. And of course, we face all the pushback that comes from the right wing with that. So I think there's many steps. I think for us in Canada, we're so lucky to be in a country where polyamory is not criminalized anymore. So long as it's a consensual relationship, you can do whatever you want. Just don't try to like legally marry more people. But I think in terms of legislation, a really big step would be able to have an easier way of creating chosen kin. Because I think that applies to not just people who are polyamorous. I think that could work for so many people to be, and we have more legislation where there's multiple parents on the birth certificate, and we have more recognition for blended families, and you can get a 3-person mortgage, and like there's workarounds that are available to us right now. But I think having an easier pathway to legally recognize chosen kin would be a really powerful step. I don't know if we'll see that, but I would love to have that happen in my lifetime.
Yeah, that's what I was going to echo. I think I agree with everyone. I think we do need more social media representation of like the healthy options, of like the options that are like vibrant and not just this one trope that like sells, because sex sells. But also, like, speaking from like personal professional experience, what would make it normal, like what Lo is saying, is that normalcy of like, it's not a big deal. There's already forms in place. So like medical emergencies, like when I go to the hospital, or for like my kids, I can put however many people I want. I don't have to justify it. I don't have to explain it to anyone. It's just accepted. And that would be the step up for me. I would be able to like just have access to that. And I also agree with Mel. It's probably a long way away before those that level of visibility is normal, like where the forms are in place. Like if you want to create a partnership or a kinship, like with somebody, it's not like marriage and that's it. There's options for legal and medical protection. And I think that's what I'm most interested in navigating in the next step, is like, how does that start to come out on an advocacy level?
Yeah, and I'm sure Jessa has tons of information about that. But yeah, I that's exactly what I was thinking, is like there's the legislative side and the steps we need to be taking in terms of, you know, advocating for that. And then there's the cultural side of like, you know, kind of the educating our friends and families around like, this is what these relationships look like, and all types of non-monogamous relationships, right? Not the ones that kind of, you know, the kind of nested ones, or the ones that look the most, you know, relatable to monogamous folks, but like the anarchules, the ones that kind of stump them the most, and getting those looking normal to them too, you know, kind of across the board. But yeah, thank you for your answers, guys. That's very interesting.
So we're getting close to wrapping up here. Thank you, everybody, for staying a little bit longer. And Jessa, I'm going to invite you to come back, because we're talking about advocacy. And this is what Open.org has been doing. And Open.org is based in the States, but you have a global reach. And we see that with this week of visibility this week. There's people all through Europe, through South America, Central America, like Australia. There is global movement happening. So I would love to give you the floor and invite you to share a little bit more with us about that.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here. So I jumped in a minute ago, but Jessa, my pronouns are she, her. I'm the executive director of Open. I'm based in Seattle, and so not too far from most of you in Vancouver. I'm looking forward to being in person at some events soon. I lived in Canada for many years. My kids live in Ottawa. And yeah, Open doesn't aspire to be a global org, but we do have a global reach, and we work with partners on the international stage, right? And this week is a great example. This is my first week of visibility event this week. So super excited to be here, and I have a very busy schedule from now till Sunday and beyond. We have some things that have already taken place before today, and we have events coming after the 12th as well. And the week of visibility is a big part of like what makes Open, you know, we're a nonprofit, so we're not a lobbying organization, but we do a lot of legal advocacy. And this conversation was amazing. I could have jumped in so many different points, especially the last, I was like, oh, it's like, no. But I'm also trying to get people to understand that Open does more than just legal advocacy. We have a lot of, you know, great press, and people follow us for the successes we've had in the US. And I saw someone in the chat give Diana Adams a shout out. They're amazing at Chosen Family Law Center in New York. And we're working with them and other partners in the US and providing support where we can around the world. But in addition to that, we do community education, support groups, and outreach, things like Week of Visibility. And that's a core part of our mission here, right? So this week is super exciting for me to show off how we have this huge following of people in Brazil and Portugal and Norway and the UK. And there's a lot of exciting things coming in Canada, you know, next year as well that I'm excited to collaborate on. So Open is a big tent movement, and we do things like local and state level legal advocacy, workshops, seminars, resource guides, and just social events as well, and our support groups, like I mentioned. So you can check us out at open-love.org. Weekofvisibility.com has almost all of our events. I'm actually still putting some in there because we have a lot, and I've been super busy with the new job and Pride Month and everything. So bear with me and keep checking our website and our social media, so that way you can find something that might be interesting to you that's virtual. There's a lot of really cool ones happening this week. And then there might be some in-person events as well. We have a lot of picnics, pub quizzes, panel discussions happening in Chicago, the Bay Area, all around the country, in New York as well, and basically coast to coast in Canada and elsewhere. So you can always reach out to me on social media and follow us. And I'm pretty easy to reach in general. You can Google me and you can find me. And I would love to answer questions and provide any resources in your local community.
And here in Vancouver, we have a whole week of events planned, which is phenomenal. So tomorrow night is the Vancouver Poly 101 discussion. Roxana will be co-facilitating with me. Our topic is how and when to come out as polyamorous. Wednesday evening, there's both the solo polyamory group meetup for Vancouver, and also there's the E&M happy hour doing their board games night. Thursday evening, Jen is hosting the Queer Love X. Is it Queers and Beers? And Friday night is an amazing open mic and art show at Cross and Crows Books, organized by the Non-Monogamy Discussion Group Vancouver. You know, we're a very polyamorous city. We can't just have one group. There's multiple groups here. It's great. Saturday, people get a day off to like see their partners and stuff. And then Sunday afternoon, there's a picnic being organized by Van Poly. So there's lots of opportunities for people who are in and around the Vancouver area. If you want to meet more non-monogamous community, I have the information posted on my socials. I think all of us have the flyers too, so you can reach out to any of us. And it's exciting to be part of this.
I'll add one more thing if I can. I'll show this on. It said it came from you, Mel, but I typed it into the chat. So a bit of shameless self-promotion here. On the 8th, I'm doing a panel discussion that's virtual. So if you go to weekofvisibility.com, you can find the event. It's called Non-Monogamy at the Margins. And we're talking about, is non-monogamy queer, and what does it mean to be queer and not non-monogamous, or non-monogamous but not queer? So we're going to dive into gatekeeping and probably make a lot of people angry, and I'm excited for a fun conversation that will talk about a lot of really important topics, and it's going to be recorded as well on our YouTube, so feel free to check it out.
That was the topic of our last Vancouver Poly 101 discussion. It's a great topic.
I saw, yes.
On that note, thank you all so much, everybody, for staying extra. I really appreciate your time and your energy and the incredible work that you all do. It is so lovely to be in community, and I don't use that word lightly, to actually say, like, we are all in this together. We're part of this grander relational ecosystem, creating the advocacy, creating the support that I know all of us wanted all those years ago, and helping to empower the upcoming generations. I'm going to invite us all to say goodbye, and we can end the stream here.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for watching.
Bye.